Welcome back to our channel. Thanks for watching and enjoy our new story. Let's begin.
The post was still up when I checked it for probably the fourth time that evening, and I still wasn't entirely sure what I was looking at. That sounds strange to say now, but that's honestly the most accurate way I can describe it. Not anger, not some immediate gut punch of betrayal, just this slow, uncomfortable realization that something was wrong, and I couldn't quite name what it was yet. Lauren and I had been together for about 2 years at that point, and the thing people who knew us both would immediately point out is that we operated pretty differently when it came to that whole online presence thing. She posted constantly, trips, food, random moments from her week, the kind of account where you could basically reconstruct her entire schedule from the last 6 months if you were bored enough to scroll back. I was the opposite. I had accounts, technically, but I'd go weeks without opening them, and when I did it was mostly just to see what other people were doing, not because I had anything to contribute. It had never been a source of tension between us, or at least I'd never thought of it that way. She knew I wasn't going to comment on her stuff or tag her in things, and I knew she was going to post whatever she wanted, and that arrangement had always felt natural, not like a compromise. So when she told me she was going on a trip with a few of her friends, 5 days, somewhere with a beach, not a big deal. I had no reaction beyond the normal kind. We talked the morning she left, she texted me when she landed, sent me a photo of the hotel room with that particular energy people have when they're excited and tired at the same time. I sent back something like, "Looks nice, have fun," and that was it. The next day, she sent a beach photo, one of those shots where the water is behind her and the light is doing something good. I looked at it for maybe 3 seconds and went back to whatever I was doing. That was Thursday. By Friday evening, I was on my couch doing nothing in particular, and I opened Instagram the way you do when you're not actually looking for anything, just filling 30 seconds before you do something else. Her post was near the top of my feed because she'd just put it up. It was a group photo, the kind that happens when someone decides to document the trip properly. 4 or 5 people on a terrace somewhere, drinks in hand, golden hour light. I scrolled past it initially. Then something made me scroll back. I don't know what it was. I looked at the photo properly this time, and that's when I saw him. Her ex. I recognized him immediately. I'd seen photos before. We'd had that early relationship conversation where you tell each other vague things about your history, and she'd mentioned him specifically, not in a dramatic way, but enough that his face was stored somewhere in my memory. He was in the photo, standing 2 people over from her, smiling at the camera like everyone else. And then I read the caption, which was something along the lines of "Unexpected reunions are the best kind," clinking glasses, with a bunch of tags. I read it again, then a third time, slower. I kept trying to figure out if there was a reading of it that made it obviously innocent, some context I was missing that would make it feel less strange, and I couldn't find one. The comments were already filling up, her friends doing the usual thing, a few people tagging each other, and then I saw someone had tagged me. Just my handle, no message, no context. Just a tag sitting there in the comments like a small, deliberate notification. I put my phone down on the coffee table and sat there for a minute. The thing I remember most about that moment is that it wasn't what I expected to feel. I'd had difficult conversations in relationships before, situations where the emotion was immediate and obvious, but this wasn't that. It was more like that specific discomfort of reading an email and knowing you need to respond, but not knowing what to say yet. I picked up the phone again, looked at the post again, put it down again. I think I made coffee at some point. I'm not sure how long I spent doing essentially nothing before I finally typed out a message to her. Just, "What is this?" Which I immediately felt was either too vague or too loaded. But I sent it anyway. She didn't respond for maybe 20 minutes. When she did, it was, "You serious right now?" Then, a minute later, "It's just a joke, calm down." I read those 2 messages a few times and felt the situation get slightly worse in a way I couldn't fully articulate. I called her. There was noise on her end immediately. Music, people talking, the particular acoustic quality of a terrace or a bar. She answered with a tone that already sounded slightly defensive, like she'd been expecting the call and had prepared for it. I asked her to explain what the caption meant, and she said something like, "It's not a big deal. We ran into each other at the resort. It's funny." I asked her if she'd known he was going to be there, and she said no, which may have been true. I genuinely don't know, and I've stopped trying to decide. Then I asked her to take the post down. There was a pause, and then she said, "Chris, come on." I said it again, more plainly. just that I'd prefer if she took it down, and that the caption was strange regardless of what she'd intended. She said I was reading into it, that it was meant as a throwaway thing, that everyone in the comments thought it was funny. I said that wasn't really the point. Her voice shifted a little then, not into an argument exactly, but into that register people use when they've decided the other person is being unreasonable and they're choosing patience rather than agreement. "You're overreacting," she said, and I could hear at least one of her friends in the background, close enough that I assumed they could hear my side too, or at least hers. I said, "Okay," and ended the call. I sat back down on the couch and looked at the post again, which was still there, still public, tagged still in the comments. The rational part of my brain kept offering me reasonable explanations. Maybe it really was just a coincidence. Maybe the caption was genuinely meant as nothing. Maybe I was letting the tag make it seem worse than it was. But there was another part that had registered something in her voice when I'd asked her to take it down. That specific quality of someone not taking a request seriously because they've already decided it doesn't merit one. I didn't call again. I didn't text again. I just sat there with the phone in my hand, the post still up, and a feeling that something had shifted in a way I couldn't quite name yet, but also couldn't fully dismiss. I'm not sure exactly when I decided to do it, but I know it wasn't some calculated moment. It was more like a slow pressure that built through the night and found a release point somewhere around midnight. I'd spent the better part of 3 hours doing that specific kind of unproductive scrolling where you're not actually reading anything, just moving your thumb and letting the screen change, and every 20 minutes or so I'd land back on her post. The comments section had grown. Most of it was harmless. People doing the group photo reaction thing, someone asking about the location, a few inside jokes between her friends that I didn't understand. But there were 2 or 3 comments that had a particular quality to them. That slightly performative amusement people do when they sense a situation and want to signal that they're in on it. One of them was from a guy I vaguely knew, someone from her wider social circle, and it was just an emoji, one of those ones with the eyes looking sideways, directed at nothing specific, but landing in a way that felt specific. I read it probably 4 times. I knew, even in the moment, that reading a sideways eyes emoji 4 times at midnight was not the behavior of someone who was handling a situation well. I knew that. And then I opened my own account and started typing anyway. The post I put up wasn't what I'd call coherent. I'd like to say I had some clear intention going in, some point I was trying to make, but honestly it read more like someone emptying their pockets onto a table. A list of things, framed loosely as a collection of odd things that had happened lately, and somewhere in the middle of it, specific enough to be identifiable but vague enough that I could technically claim otherwise, was the story of finding someone's ex in what was supposed to be a girl's trip photo with a caption about unexpected reunions. I included a detail about having asked her to take it down and being dismissed. I included another detail I probably shouldn't have, something from a conversation we'd had a few months earlier about that ex specifically, something she'd told me in what was clearly a private context. I noticed, even as I was typing it, that including it felt like a line being crossed. I included it anyway. I posted it and put the phone face down on the coffee table. For maybe 4 minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone started buzzing. The first few reactions were from people I actually knew. One friend sent a thumbs up, another a question mark, a third a voice note I didn't listen to until later. Then someone I was less close with wrote in my DMs that it seemed like a lot to put out there and asked if I was okay. I wrote back something non-committal. About 20 minutes later, Lauren texted. Not a call, just a text, which in retrospect told me something about where her head was. It said, "What did you just do?" No question mark, just a period. I typed back that I'd done the same thing she did, which I knew even as I sent it wasn't a real answer. She called 10 minutes after that. Her voice was different from the earlier call, less defensive, more like someone who had processed something unexpected and hadn't decided how to respond yet. She said the stuff in the post was private. I said her post had been public. She said that was completely different, and I said I wasn't sure it was, and then there was a silence long enough to be uncomfortable. Then she brought up the detail I'd included about their history, using his name, which she hadn't done before, and said I'd had no right to put that in there. She wasn't wrong. I knew she wasn't wrong even as I told her the post was staying up. She hung up. Within the next hour, the dynamic shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated. The comments were split in that particular uncomfortable way. Some people visibly on my side with slightly too much enthusiasm, some visibly on hers, most saying nothing at all. Then a guy I'd met maybe 3 times through mutual friends, his name was Owen, messaged me asking whether the detail about the earlier conversation was accurate and whether she'd actually said what I'd implied she'd said. I confirmed it, more directly than I should have, because I was tired and wanted someone to understand the full picture. What I didn't think about was that Owen knew people on both sides, and that his asking me wasn't neutral curiosity. It was due diligence before he decided which version to believe and who to tell. About 30 minutes later, a cropped screenshot of my post appeared in a group chat I was technically part of but never used. The kind of chat where information goes to move, not to stay. The crop removed all context and made the whole thing look worse than it already was. I saw it because someone reacted to it, and I got a notification. I opened the chat, looked at the screenshot, and sat there with that specific cold feeling of understanding that something you did in what felt like a contained space has left that space entirely, and there's no clean way to pull it back. She called again sometime the following afternoon, and I almost didn't pick up. Not because I was avoiding her specifically, just because I'd spent the morning in that particular state where you keep checking your phone and dreading what's on it. And by the time she actually called, I'd rehearsed about 4 different versions of the conversation in my head and was tired of all of them. I picked up. Her voice was flat in a way that was harder to sit with than anger would have been. Not performing anything, just genuinely worn down. She said the trip was over, that she'd left a day early, that the whole atmosphere had collapsed the moment her friends started seeing my post and forming opinions about it. I asked her why she hadn't just taken the post down when I'd asked her to. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Because I didn't think it was a big deal." I said, "And now?" She didn't answer that. What followed wasn't a resolution. It was more like 2 people jointly assessing damage without agreeing on who caused it. The fallout on her end came in layers. The immediate problem was with her friends, not a dramatic confrontation, but that specific slow erosion that happens when something private goes public and people feel forced to pick sides they didn't ask to pick. One of her closer friends had apparently told her directly that the whole situation reflected badly on her judgment. Not the original post, but the general handling of everything. And that conversation had turned into something larger and uglier than either of them had intended. A few people created distance. Not everyone. Some stayed, some were openly supportive, but the texture of that group shifted in a way that doesn't fully reverse, and both of us understood that without needing to say it. On my end, the screenshot kept moving in that slow, unglamorous way screenshots move. Not viral, nothing dramatic, just a quiet spread through overlapping social circles until it reached places I hadn't expected. Someone at my workplace saw it. I still don't know exactly how. And for about 2 weeks, certain interactions had a quality I can only describe as people having already formed an opinion they weren't going to share with me directly. Shorter conversations, a specific kind of neutral expression that people use when they're being professionally polite and nothing else. Then something happened that neither of us had accounted for. Someone, I genuinely have no idea who, took a line from my post, put it over a stock image, and started circulating it as a meme. It wasn't elaborate, just one of those image text things, but it had enough specificity to be identifiable. Lauren texted me when she saw it. "Did you make this?" I wrote back that I hadn't and didn't know who had. She replied, "Okay," and I could feel the exhaustion in that single word. That exchange was one of the last conversations we had that wasn't either logistical or hostile. About 2 weeks later she called, and the tone was different again. Clipped, careful, like she'd prepared what she wanted to say. She told me she'd spoken to someone about whether what I'd posted was actionable, that the private detail specifically might cross a line. I asked her if she was actually planning to do something about it. She said she hadn't decided. I said, "All right," and the call ended in under 3 minutes. I spent the next 10 days in a low-grade state of anxiety I'm not particularly proud of, reading things online I shouldn't have been reading, going back and forth on whether to delete the post, trying to figure out if I'd actually done something with real consequences or if she was just applying pressure. I deleted it eventually. Not because of the legal concern exactly, but because every time I saw it still sitting there it felt less like a position I was holding and more like evidence of a night I wasn't proud of. By the time I deleted it, the contact between us had already reduced to almost nothing. Not through any single decision, just the natural result of 2 people who had run out of goodwill and reasons to keep trying. There was no final conversation, no moment where we acknowledged it was over, Just a last text somewhere in there that neither of us responded to, and then silence that gradually stopped feeling temporary. I still don't know if she knew he was going to be there. I've turned it over enough times that I've lost the ability to be objective about it. What I can say with more clarity now is that her post was careless in a way that was real and worth addressing, and that what I did in response was worse, not in some abstract moral sense, but in the practical sense that it took something containable and made it not containable. She made a public joke out of something that wasn't hers to joke about. I made a worse one. The difference is that I knew, while I was doing it, that I was crossing a line. I just decided that being right was more important than where the line was. It wasn't. That's more or less the whole thing.
Here is what we can take away from Chris's story. Being right isn't a trophy. Chris proved his point, but he lost his relationship in the process. Winning an argument by burning everything down is a hollow victory. The internet is a one-way door. Once you turn private pain into a public post, you lose control. It's no longer your story. It's just content for others to judge, crop, and meme. Dismissal is the real poison. The collapse started the moment Lauren called his feelings an overreaction. When you stop validating your partner's perspective, the connection is already gone. Privacy is the ultimate trust. Using a partner's secrets as a weapon is a point of no return. You might win the digital war, but you'll never get that trust back.